Have you ever noticed how easy it can be to trust other people's opinions while constantly questioning your own? We ask our friends, we ask our family, we even ask strangers on the internet. We look for reassurance, validation, or confirmation, anything that helps us feel more certain. And then when it comes to trusting ourselves, many of us struggle. Not because we're incapable of making good decisions, but because somewhere along the way we've stopped believing that our own voice was enough. Self-trust is usually lost. It's not absent. It's not totally gone. I don't believe that most people are born disconnected from ourselves. In fact, I think many of us begin life with a fairly strong sense of what feels right and wrong and what feels safe and what doesn't. But over time, that trust can become buried beneath criticisms, fear, disappointment, rejection, self-doubt, people-pleasing, and the opinions of what other people think, the opinions of those around us. And eventually we stop asking, what do I think? And we end up asking things like, what does everybody else think? What is their thought? What are their opinions? We learn to second guess ourselves constantly. Sometimes it happens because we've made mistakes or because we've been criticized. Sometimes it happens because we've spent years trying to make other people happy. And after enough experiences like that, we begin questioning our own instincts before we even had a chance to listen to them. So at that point, we overanalyze, we overthink, we replay conversations in our heads, and we search for that certainty. There's self-trust and intuition. This is where I think intuition often gets misunderstood. Many people assume intuition should feel very loud and dramatic and undeniable. But more often than not, intuition is much more quieter than that. It's usually the fear and anxiety or the self-doubt and the overthinking that makes all that noise. And when we've spent years questioning ourselves, it becomes increasingly difficult to distinguish between our genuine inner knowing and the fear of making the wrong choice. There's a cost of not trusting ourselves. When we don't trust ourselves, we often begin looking outside of ourselves. And we're looking outside of ourselves for answers to everything. We may stay in situations far longer than we should, and we tend to ignore those red flags. We seek validation or constant reassurances, and we delay decisions. We abandon what we genuinely want because someone else's opinion feels more trustworthy than our own. I mean, especially when there's, a degree or a fancy title behind the name. And don't get me wrong, of course, it's not to say expertise doesn't absolutely have value. Of course it does, but it also doesn't mean that we should completely disconnect from our own thoughts and experiences and our instincts and intuition. And over time, that can become exhausting and overwhelming because no matter how much advice we receive, there's always going to be moments in life where we eventually have to decide for ourselves. This is one of the reasons I find numerology so valuable, not because a number tells us who we should be, but because it often helps us recognize parts of ourselves that we may have spent years doubting and minimizing or overlooking. I've seen people read portions of their numerology profile and immediately say things like they've never been able to put that into words before. Sometimes the greatest value isn't the actual information itself, but rather it's, sometimes it's the validation that maybe we know ourselves better than we've been giving ourselves credit for. I think maybe many of us spend years trying to become more confident when what we're really searching for is trust. Trust in our own judgment, trust in our own experiences, and especially trust in our own intuition and that inner self knowing. Because the truth is, certainty is rarely available, but self-trust can still exist even when certainty doesn't. And perhaps that's where self-trust begins. Not by having all the answers or by never making mistakes, but by recognizing that we are often far more capable, resilient, and intuitive than we've been giving ourselves credit for. And by learning that uncertainty and self-trust can exist at the same time. If this conversation resonates with you, my name is Priscilla Daphney. I share reflective guidance around intuition, self-awareness, numerology, emotional healing, and the patterns that shape our lives here on this channel. If you'd like to learn more about my work, including my numerology reports and other offerings, you can visit me at priscilladaphney.com. And until next time, be gentle with yourself, and as you continue learning to trust your own voice.